I wasn't always going to be a futurist. In fact, when I was 17 years old, I knew for sure two things. One was that the only acceptable career for me was to be a doctor or an engineer, first-generation immigrant family. And the second was that I decided for sure that I was going to be a playwright. And my dad was not too impressed with this career choice, as you can imagine. But I went and did an internship at the Studio Theater in Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And at the Studio Theater, I increased my love and passion for the theater. And my dad was also not impressed by this. So he decided that he was going to suggest how I spend my summer between junior and senior years in high school. And he said, I found this amazing program. You go away for 3 weeks. Already I'm listening, right? Go away for 3 weeks. And then he told me what the program was. And it was the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology Engineering Camp. So my dad, doing what now I understand as a dad, as being a dad myself, he was just looking out for me. He wanted me to be able to make enough money to actually be able to retire, right? And he didn't think that playwriting would do that for me. So I said yes to engineering camp, because 3 weeks away. And I showed up to engineering camp, and the first day that I was there, I realized this was not my place. These were not my people. I was not going to be able to get along with them in the conversations that they were having. And in fact, unfortunately for me, twice, the first day they divided us all into teams. And so I was in a team with 4 people, and within the first 5 minutes of the conversation, the team realized that I was not going to be useful at all. And 1 minute after that, they told me I was not going to be useful anymore, and they said, we got this, you're good. So I was abandoned by my team at engineering camp on the first day. And that night I went back to my room, and sadly, this was before Netflix, right? So I couldn't just sit there and stream something for 3 weeks. No internet. I had to do something. So I decided that night that I was going to be the cruise director for engineering camp. I would open mic nights, we would have ultimate frisbee competitions, we'd go spelunking, we'd play poker. We were gonna have a good time, and I was gonna be in charge of it, because I had to do something. So that's what I did for 3 weeks. I went to engineering camp, I had an awesome time. And the last day of engineering camp, we all present our projects, and we had our team presenting, and I kind of did one of these things, where I sort of stand in the back and pretend like I'd done something, even though I hadn't, right? Because my team was presenting. Thankfully, we didn't win, because I would have felt really guilty about that. But then they had a couple of individual awards, and one of the individual awards they had was the Good Citizen Award. And the Good Citizen Award was based on votes from everybody else in the program. And remember, they divided us all into teams on the first day. So what happened was everyone stayed pretty much within their team, and most people didn't know anybody outside of their team except the cruise director. So I got all the votes, and I won this Good Citizen Award, and I'm all excited, and I'm showing up off my plane. I get off the plane, and I'm coming off the baggage claim, and I see my dad over there, right? And I'm going towards him because he was picking me up, and we had this one, if you've ever seen one of those Bollywood movies, where people are running towards each other, it was one of those things. I have a big smile, he's over here, and he has a big smile, and he's he's so happy, and he's thinking, my master plan worked. My kid's gonna be an engineer. He'll actually be able to live. And I'm thinking, I won this Good Citizen Award. I can't wait to tell my dad. And I told him about it. And he realized in that moment that I was not going to be an engineer, in fact. So he was a little disappointed, but he said, that's great. But it was only years later that I told someone that story, and they said, so you went to engineering camp for 17-year-old boys, and you won Miss Congeniality. And I said, yeah, that's basically what happened. But what it taught me about myself at 17 was a pretty epic thing, which is that I was better at people than I was at technology. And over time, I realized that this might be the secret to being successful. Now, I didn't end up becoming a playwright, and my dad is happy with what I'm doing now, so all of it was resolved. But I ended up taking my love of writing and turning it into marketing and advertising, going into the world of marketing and advertising. And as soon as I went into the world of marketing and advertising, which is about understanding people, I realized that we have a pretty big problem that has been partially caused by marketing and advertising, which is people don't know what to believe or trust anymore. Evian is naive spelled backwards. Is that a conspiracy theory? Is this water actually coming from the Swiss Alps? Or is it just Jersey water that's been repackaged, right? I'm not dissing on Jersey water, by the way. It might be good. I'm just saying that's not what's on the package. That's not what we think. And unfortunately, marketing's been doing this for a long time. More Dr. Smoke Camels than ever before, so it should be okay, right? It's probably okay for us. We see all of these ads that don't make us feel good about ourselves. Here's a real ad for Levi's that says, hotness comes in all shapes and sizes, and then it shows you 4 women who are basically the same size. I'm not even the target audience for this, and I feel slightly less hot. How are we supposed to feel about these things? Maybe we just need better stories, right? But the claims are so unbelievable. Cocoa Krispies, all natural. Does this make sense to you? Is there a tree that grows this product that we don't know about? No, because it's stories, right? And we think in our heads, oh, well, people buy stories. Who wouldn't buy this, right? Until eventually we figure out, yeah, it's Cheerios, but it was a good story, right? Then the story is what matters. And the problem is that it's not just marketing, it's media too. So we see unbelievable headlines. We're surrounded by them, right? In fact, I'm going to give you a very quick test. So you're a savvy audience, okay? So we're going to do a very quick interactive poll. I'm going to share with you 4 headlines, and then we're going to do a vote. So don't vote right away. We'll vote at the end. You're going to vote for which headlines you think are real stories, okay? Clear? You with me? Yes? Okay. So first story. Don't vote yet. Chemical in McDonald's fries could cure baldness. First story. Second story. New study finds 85% of Americans don't know all the dance moves to the national anthem. Third story, bumblebee vomit. Scientists are no longer ignoring it. We were talking about the bees before, so this could be one. This could be real. And the fourth story, sassy seal accidentally slaps man across face with an octopus. All right, here we go. We're going to vote. All right, vote individually. Who believes the first story is real? Raise your hand, nice and high. Okay, maybe like 2% of the room. Okay, hands down, hands down, hands down. All right, number 2 story. Who believes this one's real? Hands nice and high. Okay, it's same thing, 2% of the room. Okay, hands down. Number 3, who believes this one's real? Okay, whoa, that's like maybe 75% of the room. Okay, hands down. And the last one, sassy seal, accidentally slaps man. Okay, this is pretty, wow. Maybe you know something I don't. All right, are you ready to see how good you were at telling which stories were real? All right, story number 1, real. Wait, first of all, let me explain, okay? Let me explain. Okay, you got it right, you got it right, you got it right. All right, first of all, I tried this and it doesn't work. I mean, I had to. Second of all, the reason why it's a real story is because McDonald's fries apparently have a trace chemical element in it, and that chemical can also be shown to regrow hair. So some online writer, not a journalist, some online writer puts the pieces together, headline writes itself, goes viral. Because bad people, not anybody in this room, but bad people will sometimes share a story with a headline without reading the story. We would never do this, anybody in this room would never do this, but people do that, right? Which is how stories like this go viral. So the story, in fact, was published and real, but the science is fake, okay? And that's what happens a lot of times. This one was indeed a fake story. This one was in The Onion, which is a satirical news site. There are, in fact, so far, no dance moves to the national anthem. But after reading this, I kind of was feeling like there really should be. So, I mean, that's just a whole different lobbying thing we probably need to figure out. But third story, yes, this was real. So most of you, I think, got this one. This was real. And the fourth story, sassy seal, that one was the slap that was heard around New Zealand. And yes, you know you're going to be Googling this one afterwards, and you should, because it is highly entertaining. But the challenge is that it is harder to know what matters than ever before. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because, as a futurist, I spend most of my time trying to figure out where the world is going. For the last 10 years, I've written a book annually called Non-Obvious. And the whole point of the book is to find these new, interesting, different ideas and to teach people how to think in this way. So what we're going to do with our remaining time together is 2 things. One is I'm going to teach you what the secret to being able to think like a non-obvious thinker is, so that you can do this yourself. And the second thing we're going to do is I'm going to give you 3 trends from the research that will be useful for you in your work. And with each one of those trends, I'm not just going to give you the theater of the trend, I'm going to give you what I call a stealable idea, which is something that you can take with the trend and you can use it for later. So if you want to take notes by taking photos of the slides, that's a great way to do it. If you want to have these slides afterwards, I'm happy to share them with anyone, and I'll give you a way to get in touch with me and get those. Or you can take notes on physical paper, which is great too. Or you can just sit back and have what HBO calls a lean-back experience and have a good time now and forget everything, and that's okay too, if that works for you. That's okay too. I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to give you a good time and try and teach you something, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're together. It's an amazing stage. There has been an amazing crop of speakers. The team at TIA has done an amazing job. I mean, let's just give them a hand for a second. I mean, I come to a lot of events too, and I got to say, keeping it moving with speakers that are speaking for a shorter amount of time, it's harder as a speaker, but it's better for an audience, for sure. So congrats on making the right choice for them. Not for me. I would like to talk for longer, but it's good for them. Yeah, it's good for them. So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is what's coming next, right? And I have a book coming out in March called The Future Normal. And if you go to this site, you can actually sign up and get a free sneak preview of the whole book before it comes out in March. So that's the way to do that straight off of this URL. But I'll share with you a couple things that were really interesting as we started doing the research for this. And the first was that the future that we think is far off is already here. So another very quick poll. Who believes of these faces that I'm showing you here that there's a real face on the top row, of a real person on the top row? Raise your hand. Nice and high. On the top row only. Okay, maybe, okay, nice and high. Okay, that's maybe 25, 30% of the room. Okay, hands up. Who believes there's a real face on the bottom row? Okay, that's maybe, some of you voted twice. Come on, that's sort of, all right, okay, hands down. I didn't give you the rules, so that's good. Actually, none of these are real people. These are all AI-generated faces based on AI reading technology out there and creating faces of people that don't exist. And that's already here. You can go and see that right now. This is a glove that allows you to learn how to play the piano in 20 minutes by sending electrical pulses through your fingers so you can learn the muscle memory. And when you take the glove off, people remember how to play the song that they just learned. Their fingers remember. New way to learn piano. This is a color-changing BMW, which looks like a toy, but was actually a real car at CES earlier this year, where you can change the color of the exterior to be anything you want through a new technology called e-ink. If they had this for license plates, you could totally get away with speeding and stuff. I mean, I know what you're thinking. You know you were thinking something like that, right? There's contact lenses that are being tested right now that have information in the lens so you could look up at the stars and it will show you where the constellations are, for example. Lots of other things it could do, but this was one of the things I thought was kind of cool, so I just showcased that. Flying cars. Yes, in fact, this was a real concept. This is actually out there too right now, and it folds up to the size of a parking spot. So you can fly the car, drive it on the road, park it in an actual regular-sized parking spot. And then exoskeletons to allow us to lift more or lift more safely in warehouse environments. These are all real things. A robot doing a laser tattoo of an actual tattoo controlled by a tattoo artist who is somewhere else. Would you get a tattoo from a robot? That's already happening too. So finding these things, right, my method I use for this is what I call my haystack method. And essentially, the secret to all of this comes down to gathering information and paying attention to details. So I pay attention to things. So when I'm walking down the street, I'm not doing what a lot of times all of us are doing, which is getting that last message out until eventually I'm, about to kill myself right off the edge of the stage. I'm actually looking around. And it seems like a random, weird thing to suggest as like the secret to being able to predict the future. But if you're going to see what no one else sees, you actually have to pay attention and see it, right? That's where it starts. So the method that I use, and I'll show you this really quick time-lapse video. I'm not sure if it's actually playing. Can you guys play the video? There we go. Whoop. I'll tell you about that picture in a second. All right. Will you hit play or will I hit play? There you go. So this is a time-lapse video of me with the process that I use behind finding what the trends are. And essentially, it's taking information and finding themes between the information. So there's lots of different stories and elements that relate to a similar concept. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm grouping. This is essentially a grouping exercise. And yes, it's on paper. I do a lot of digital work as well, but I'm showing you the paper side because it's much more visual. And when you see how these pieces come together, essentially what you're seeing is that I don't have secret access to like a lab that nobody else has, or I get to talk to people who are sort of more future forward than anyone else. What I'm doing is a process to try and pull these things together. And that's really the secret behind being able to do this, because I'm not predicting something that might happen. What I'm predicting is something that's already happening that will matter more over time. That's the secret. It's predicting the accelerating present. Something that's present that's going to be accelerating. And so this was our way of visualizing that, which is sifting through all the information and standing in front of it. And this is not Photoshop, by the way. I stood there while they put all these Post-it notes on in order to actually demonstrate that. And what it does is it helps turn you into what Isaac Asimov called a speed understander instead of a speed reader. And I love that. Because if you could be a speed understander, you could put all these pieces together. So let's do a quick dive into the 3 trends, and then I've got a final story for you, and then we will rock into everything else that's coming. And I know you have an amazing 3 days planned. So the first trend I want to share with you is instant knowledge. And instant knowledge is this idea that we expect to be able to learn everything faster and faster. Even stories in the media are presented with 2 versions. There's a quick read version and a deep read version. So you can click on the button depending on how much time you want to spend reading the article. And more media properties are doing this. We talked about the haptic learning glove. That's a great example of instant learning too. You're putting on the glove and you're learning how to do something straight from the impulses that happen there. Fender's created an entire platform to help people learn how to play the guitar faster. And all of these are examples of offering on-demand learning and content. And so the stealable idea here is if you're trying to help people, and a couple of speakers stressed this earlier, right? Education. You got to be able to educate people. And if you want to be able to educate them in the way that they're going to be able to pay attention, it can't be this long drawn-out thing. It's got to be the quick hits. There's a reason why TikTok, their entire advertising campaign is learned it on TikTok. Because that's what kids are doing right now. They're learning things on TikTok too. They're not just watching people do weird dances. They are also doing that. But they're learning things too on TikTok. It's fascinating. Second big trend, human mode. When we're tired of all this technology that isolates us, we look for the human connection. We look for the human version. Here's a great example of a grocery store in the UK that created the human slow checkout line. The opposite of the kiosk. Because they realized that some people who have dementia or Alzheimer's, or some people just need a little extra time. And so they created a dedicated lane for that. I mean, think about the empathy involved in seeing all the technology out there and saying, you know, we could kiosk it up, and we have space for one more kiosk. But instead of doing that, we're going to create an experience for the people who are often left behind, the people who are often forgotten. That's what the human mode does. If you've tried any VR, that's what VR can do too. You put on this headset and you experience what it's like to be a refugee in a refugee camp, or experience what it's like to be a prisoner in a solitary confinement. Or, like this guy in the corner, experience what it's like to be a cow who's, you know, going to be led to the slaughterhouse and whose life is not going to end well, which is what that VR experience is. And it allows you to take yourself and put yourself into someone else's shoes. It's amazing. This suit is fabulous experience. It allows you to put it on and experience what it's like to be 40 years older than you are, physically. Imagine the empathy in that, especially for young people who don't really understand the physical limitations as you get older. Now I'm like, oh man, my knee, like, you know, I understand now because I'm older, but I probably wouldn't have when I was younger. And so something like this can really be transformative as well. And what it leads us to is, how do you build this made with empathy as a strategy? The last trend that I'll share is amplified identity. So we see ourselves and portray ourselves in different ways, sometimes in not so wise ways, right? But we are different personalities on different platforms. We choose to share different aspects of ourselves in different places. We're different parts of ourselves in all of these places. And what it means is that no longer are there boys' toys and girls' toys, because kids can play with any toys. No longer is there men's clothing and female clothing, because now more fashion brands are creating unisex, genderless clothing. So what all of this means is, how do you help people have an identity outside of their condition, outside of their situation, outside of themselves and where they are? Because that's what this does. So the last thing that I'll share with you as we put these pieces together is what's really important when you think about the future. What's really important as you think about how to be what I call a non-obvious thinker. And so the secret I want to share with you is one that some of you may recognize, okay? So as soon as I put this up, if you do recognize it, put your hand up nice and high. All right, I see 1 there, 2, 3, 4, okay, maybe like 15 people in the room. All right, hands down. So for those of you who don't recognize this secret, this is a secret video game cheating code called the Konami code. That was huge when I was a kid. The Konami code allowed my brother and I to play this game and win, which some of you who are raising your hands, you might recognize. Yeah, you played this, all right. See, Contra was an impossible game because you only got 3 lives unless you had the secret code. Because with the secret code, you could get 30 lives. And when you got 30 lives instead of 3 lives, you could win this game. And I remember falling in love with this game, and here I am like 30 years later talking about it on stage to you. But the insight behind this game and the creators of this game is the same one that powers so much of why some things succeed and why others don't. Why you're able to see what some people see and why others are just oblivious and they walk past, which is what the organizers and creators of the game knew, is that they had to do something like this to get people to fall in love with it because they understood their audience. They understood people. And at the end of the day, at the end of all of my experience in going to engineering camp or going into advertising and marketing to then becoming somebody who focuses on the future to now being a speaker and talking to people constantly at different events, I've realized this over and over and over again. It doesn't matter what your industry is, if you're working in financial services or politics or anything else, the people who understand people always win. And if you're able to do this, not only will you connect more easily, and be able to put the pieces together and help people prepare for the future, you might just be able to predict the future for yourself. So about 10 years ago, I just published my second book, and I received an invitation, the first one in my life, to go and speak outside of America. And I was pretty excited. It was in Singapore. And as part of that engagement, the team at Singapore decided to organize with a local bookstore to have a book signing event, which was even cooler. Because when you write a book, you always want to sign the book. So when people say, will you sign my book? The answer is always yes, right? That's one of the reasons you write the book, to be able to do that. So I was very excited. And I showed up to Singapore, and I was feeling like a superstar, right? And then I went to the bookstore, and I was ready for my talk, and I showed up there, and I told them who I was, and they said, who? And I said who I was, and they said, I'm sorry, you want to buy what book? And I said, no, I'm not buying a book. I'm here to sign a book. We're doing a book event. And they said, no, I don't think so. And I said, yeah, it's on the schedule. And finally, I gave them the details of the book. They said, oh, yeah, we do have this. We do have it. And so now I'm ready. I'm back on track. I'm picturing the audience. I'm like ready to go. It's going to be one of those book readings that you see in movies and TV shows, right? Where the audience is standing there, and then one person gives you a standing ovation, then everybody else gives you a standing ovation. That's what I'm picturing in my head, right? And as they take me into the bookstore, they take me in between the stacks, right? The rows of books, into the business section. And it's in the middle of the stacks. And I look down, and I see this. This is what they have organized for me for my book signing event with no chairs. And they said, here you go. So I'm standing there with my microphone, and I'm looking around, and nobody's there. And then one person walks up, and she says, do you know where the bathroom is? And I told her, which makes me basically store staff at this point, right? And then someone else walks up and stands there, clearly there for my event that hasn't started yet. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is my chance to create this viral movement, right? I'll start with one person, I'll start talking, people will start coming, and I'll turn this into a book reading. And she stands there very patiently for I don't know how many minutes, but more minutes than would have been reasonable, right? She was super patient. And then finally she raises her hand. You're the only one here, you don't have to raise your hand. But she raises her hand. And she says, what are you going to sing? Yeah, that was not my best moment. That was every author's worst nightmare, showing up to something and having a book reading and nobody's there. So I was not feeling like a superstar after this moment. But a couple weeks later, I got an email. And this email had no subject line. And you know what types of emails have no subject line, right? But for some reason, I chose to open it. And when I opened it, I saw this message that said, my assistant read your book and loved it. I have a new book coming, let's talk. And then it has the person's name and their phone number. That's it. So, of course, I Google this person, and I find out that he's a legendary Hollywood producer, like legendary. So, of course, now I'm a little interested, I'm intrigued. So I take the phone and I call the number and I talk to this guy. We talk for 10 minutes and he says, look, I really like your ideas. We're about to go and launch my book. Come to LA, come and meet with me. I said, okay, I'll come and meet with you in LA. So I get to LA and I drive up to his place. And it turns out the office that he invited me to is actually his home. And his home is so big that it has 2 gates that you have to drive through. So I'm in my small rental Kia, driving through Beverly Hills. I go through the first gate, then I get to the second gate, go through the gate, tell them who I am, park in the visitor slot, and then I'm ushered into what looks like a mansion. And as I'm walking through the front door of this mansion, I happen to look up the hill to see the much bigger second mansion, because this small mansion is his office and the bigger mansion is the one he lives in. So we're in his tiny mansion, about to have a meeting. And as I'm waiting for him to come in, I'm looking around, and I see on the side, I see Oscars, like actual Oscars in this trophy case. And I see a life-size Batman suit that like a crazy comic book fan would have in their home. And as I go a little closer and I look at the inscription on this, I see that it's the actual suit that Michael Keaton wore in Batman. That's what this suit is. So this guy is, big time. And he walks in a upper and lower matching jumpsuit. And he's got a Ziploc bag in his pocket, which he pulls out. And he unrolls it on the pool table inside of his second mansion office. And he's got 15 different colored pills that he empties out into his hands. He puts them all in his mouth, and then he takes out some Yoo-Hoo, and he just washes it all down with his Yoo-Hoo. Which, for my non-American friends, is it's not a chocolate milk, it's a chocolate-flavored drink, which is what it says on the bottle. That tells you everything you need to know about, what that is. Right. And now he's ready for the meeting. So we have the meeting, and I give him some ideas, and I think he's resonating with the ideas. I think he's pretty into it. And at the end of all of those things, he asks me the question that I should have anticipated, but didn't. He says, "Thank you for all these ideas. Now, what can I do for you?" What can I do for you? Perfectly reasonable question, right? I helped him. I showed up. I went through all of this stuff. I gave him all of the ideas that I could possibly think of. It's reasonable for him to say, "What can I do for you?" And in the moment, I couldn't come up with anything because his world was not my world. I wasn't from the place that he was from. I didn't have a movie I was producing. I didn't have anything that I could go to a Hollywood producer and say, "Yeah, help me with this thing." I was at this moment in the road. I was at this fork in the road, and I couldn't think of anything because I was stuck. And the moment I was stuck in is one that I think we're all familiar with. It's that moment when you just can't get the new idea. You can't get the next thing. You're stuck in the obvious. You're stuck in the things you know, and so you're unable to imagine the things you don't. And that, for me, was a huge challenge. It brought me to this attention on something that I had struggled with but didn't realize it until that moment. And I decided right then that I was not going to be in a situation like that again. Not about the Hollywood producer, about asking for a favor or cashing in, so to speak. I was happy to help him. That wasn't the point. The point was that I had a limitation on how I saw the world. And it bothered me. I didn't want that anymore. I wanted to be more open-minded. I didn't want to just see the same thing and then pour more fuel on it and have the same thing. Because we all get trapped in this moment. We all get trapped in the obvious. And it surrounds us. And so from that point, I started thinking about how to be more non-obvious. And eventually I started writing books about being non-obvious. And I started coming to this stage and talking about being non-obvious and sharing trends and insights and ideas and all of those things. And when they invited me to come back this year, I thought, I want to try and do something that I've never done before. I want to do something non-obvious for me, which is to talk about something totally different. And I knew that this was the right stage to do it because, as Hugh said, we were both in Sydney a couple months ago. And in Sydney, we were getting ready backstage to go on. He was getting mic'd up, I was getting mic'd up. And there was a moment when we were both sitting there and the AV guy came out and he did one of these. He walks back out as soon as he saw me. And what he'd done is he looked at me and then he walked out. And as a professional speaker, you know that there's 3 types of microphones you can get. You can get a handheld microphone. You can get a lavalier microphone, which is like a black microphone, like what I have now, which is usually black. Or you can get a headset microphone. And headset microphones generally are skin tone, which means they're white. Most of them. But what this AV guy had done is he saw
what I look like, he went to the back and he pulled out a brown-toned microphone for me, which they already had ready to go. And that was minutes before I was going on stage. And because of that, I felt this sense of belonging, that I was in this place that was safe, that was trusted, where I trusted them and they trusted me. And my talk reflected that, because this is right before I'm going on stage. This is the moment. And that's why I love South by Southwest. I love South by Southwest because it's a trusted place. It's a place of belonging. It's a place where we can go and share new ideas. And so that's why I'm doing something that I haven't done before. I'm going to share with you the secrets, so to speak, of non-obvious thinking. Why I'm able to do what I do, why I can talk about the future and share all of these things about the future and be a futurist, and all of the things that I've shared with you, if you've seen any of my past talks, or if you want to go on YouTube and watch them afterwards, which you certainly can. But I want to give you the ability to do that for yourself. Because the thing is, we need more of that. Obvious thinking is all around us. And obvious thinking is this inability to imagine something different. It's an inability to think bigger, to be more open-minded, to shift your perspective. And the question is, what if more people in the world didn't have this barrier? What if all of us didn't? What could we come up with? What could we imagine that we can't currently imagine? Now, there's a few ways that this holds us back. There's some human problems that are made worse by obvious thinking. And before we can figure out how to be more non-obvious, we have to identify what those are. And the first one is this global rise of loneliness and anxiety that is talked about in many different ways, the epidemic of loneliness that is out there. Anxiety felt by young people, but also people of all ages, because of everything we see in the world around us. And it leads to these feelings of isolation, these feelings of lost optimism. And you see stories and reflections of this all over. There's a guy who married a hologram because he wanted someone who was always there for him. There was this fascinating statistic I came across in a study about work that said 90% of intergenerational or interracial friendships start at work. So in a world where we all start doing virtual work or working remotely, those relationships start to become harder. Now you only interact with people like you, and not people from different generations or people from different backgrounds who aren't like you. Now, we see lots of science fiction, too, that's imagining this future world, that's giving us all of these pictures of what the future is going to be like, and they all pretty much boil down to one argument, which is that in the future, we're basically all screwed. That's what they all say. And that's not a good way to live. All of this rage is inside us, and we need stuff we never needed before, like punching bags in the middle of the street, so that we can just randomly walk up and punch things. Maybe that'll help, right? If we just get our rage out in some way. Second big problem is noise and choice overload. We have so much noise that we just don't know. We don't know what to pay attention to anymore because there's so much stuff. We think that we want all of these things all in one. But when we do get all of this stuff, I don't know what to use first. I don't know how to navigate this. And technology makes it worse because we need every choice presented to us, even the idiotic ones. They're always there. And so we can't tell what the difference is. There was a scientist who thought he'd be funny, and he posted a picture of a chorizo and said it was a new planet that he discovered. And everyone thought it was real, until he's like, whoa, 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 this is a piece of chorizo. This is not a new planet that we discovered. There's no planet chorizo. Some of you are thinking that might be pretty awesome, Planet Chorizo, by the way. But no, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. But every story we get, we're presented at the bottom of the story with other stories that we have to read. My roommate moved in and I did something very creepy, and I can't stop thinking about it. Whoa, what did you do? I need to read this story. And by the way, if that's not interesting enough, I surely need to know what Alyssa Milano looks like right now. So I'll click on one of these stories because that's what we keep getting fed, right? That's the clickbait. And we know it's clickbait. And we feel bad when we click on it. But sometimes it's there. And it's hard. Now, we're also in the middle of a modern believability crisis. where we just don't know what to trust, and so we're unwilling to trust anyone or anything. And in the US, we're about to come up with a presidential election. And everyone's worried about deepfakes and AI, and I spoke to several experts about deepfakes and AI, and one of them said something really interesting. He said, I'm not as worried about the impact of AI and deepfakes on the US election this year. And the reason he's not that worried is because trust is so low that people don't believe anything. So they won't believe the deepfake also. That's a pretty depressing place to be when your only fight against lies is the fact that no one believes anything anymore. But we just don't know. I mean, we have all of these faces, and I will go to audiences, less tech-savvy audiences than you, and I'll ask them, okay, who believes the face on the top row is AI-generated? And who believes the face on the bottom row is AI-generated? And some of you have already figured out that they're all AI-generated. None of these are real people. They're just faces generated by AI. Because the impact of that and what it can do is getting to be more and more amazing. We're seeing examples of that, right? And it's scary, and it's mind-blowing, and it's all of the things that all the words that you would use to describe it. But it makes it harder to know what's true. So everything has to be breaking news in order to get you to pay attention to it. That's the only way to get people to pay attention. Or maybe we just need better statistics, right? 82% of statistics are completely made up. You know how I know that? Because I asked 84% of you right before this. I'm making up all these statistics as I'm telling them to you. That's what numbers can sometimes be. But we see this over and over. Evian is naive spelled backwards. Is that a conspiracy theory? Is this water actually coming from the Swiss Alps? Many of you have heard this one before. Please listen carefully, as our menu options have changed. No, they fucking haven't. They're the same menu options that they've always been. Why do we have these messages? Why do we see all of these things, right? We see this over and over again, these unbelievable messages. And we see them and we are impacted by them because our faith in the trust of what we're seeing goes down further and further. These are 4 pictures of 4 women who apparently, hotness comes in all shapes and sizes, but those 4 women are basically the same size. So I don't know what you're supposed to feel after seeing something like that, but definitely not good because it's all a story and we believe and we hear over and over again, especially for someone like me who comes from the world of marketing, that if you have a great story, people will buy it. All you need is a great story. That's the secret. Great story. That's it. That's the secret. Everyone buys that. Who wouldn't want a donut tree that would come from this? That sounds like the best thing ever. Until eventually you figure it out, right? And so what the impact is of all of this stuff leading from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing is we're just pissed off. We don't even belong to a political party. Our political party is pissed off in all places around the world, right? And maybe we need someone to blame. Maybe it is capitalism that's to blame. Maybe it is, maybe it's something else. But that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge. Now, the fourth big thing is it's a lack of purpose, a lack of motivation. We can't imagine a better world. We can't imagine a better future. And so we just don't know what to do. And sometimes we have even the moments of reflection that highlight this for us, right? There was a great viral post where Adam Grant said, what was the worst career advice you've ever received? And the best response I saw to this was Monica Lewinsky. I mean, this was just... How epic is that, right? I mean, talk about owning your story. That is just too amazing. She is amazing. That is too amazing, right? But we see like quiet quitting happening because we just aren't happy with what we have. We always want something else. We want something more. And there's a very real existence of what is called bullshit jobs. This book does an excellent job of explaining what is a bullshit job. A bullshit job is one that has no purpose for existing, where even the person doing it can't justify it.